The wind off the Yellowstone River runs flat to mean across the cut wheat stubble, and at 3:14 in the morning it is 19 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping. Marcus Doyle is on his knees in the dirt with a flat-bladed spade, cutting the prairie open in rectangles the size of cinder blocks. Each block weighs about 40 pounds. He has cut 62 of them tonight. His back, the back the pipeline tore up in 2019, is a dull metal bar from his right shoulder to his hip. He works by the headlights of a 1998 Ford F-250 he bought for $1,800 with the last of his disability back pay. The engine is off. The lights are wired to a deep cycle battery, so he can run them 4 hours without killing the truck. The grass smells like cold iron and old rain. A pair of headlights swings off the county road and stops at the gate. The window rolls down. A man in a Carhartt jacket leans out and stares at the half-built thing in the field, the frame plywood box already half-swallowed by stacked sod, like a grave that decided to keep going. "Brother," the man calls out, laughing, "you building a coffin out here or what?" Marcus straightens up slow. He lifts one gloved hand. He says nothing. The truck pulls away. He goes back to cutting. Marcus Doyle is 44 years old. He grew up in Glendive, Montana, the kind of eastern Montana town where the wind decides what your week looks like. He enlisted at 19 as a combat engineer, 12B, 2 tours in Anbar Province, 2005 and 2007. What he did over there, mostly, was build things fast that had to stop bullets and shrapnel in 130 degrees Fahrenheit afternoons. Sandbag revetments, HESCO barriers, hardened sleeping positions cut into the date. He learned that earth, packed right, will stop almost anything. He came home, married a woman named Renee, worked pipeline for 11 years across the Bakken. In 2019, a section of pipe rolled wrong on a slope outside Sydney and pinned him for 40 seconds against a skid loader. 2 surgeries. Chronic pain. The marriage didn't last a second year of recovery. Renee moved to Billings. Marcus stayed. In 2022, a VA benefits dispute froze his disability checks for 9 months. He lost the apartment in Glendive that October. He slept in the F-250 through the first winter, parked at trailheads and rest stops, running the engine in 20-minute boasts. By the second winter, he understood that another season in the cab would kill him. In September of last year, a man at the VFW told him about a quarter section of land east of town. The owner had died. The heirs lived in Seattle and weren't paying attention, and the back corner was a long way from the county road. Marcus drove out and walked it. South-facing slope. Hard prairie sod. The good kind. The kind held together by 80 years of unbroken root. He parked the truck behind a windbreak of Russian olive and started measuring. What Marcus saw on that slope, that nobody driving the county road saw, was a fighting position waiting to be built. In Anbar, he had cut sod blocks out of irrigated date palm fields to top sandbag walls. The sod insulated against the sun and mortar fragments both. The principle was simple. 6 feet of packed earth will hold whatever temperature is 6 feet down, and 6 feet down on the northern plains is roughly 45 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. If you build a shelter and bury it in sod, the inside wants to be 45 degrees Fahrenheit before you even light a fire. From 45 degrees Fahrenheit, a small stove can hold 60 degrees Fahrenheit through a minus 30 degree F night without breaking a sweat. He started gathering materials in October. Behind a lumber yard in town, he pulled 38 oak shipping pallets out of a dumpster the foreman told him to help himself to. From a torn-down grain bin on a neighbor's place, he got 14 sheets of half-rotten plywood and roughly 200 board feet of dimensional 2x6. From the county landfill, before the gate guy started watching too close, he pulled an old cast-iron barrel stove and a rusted but intact length of 6-inch stovepipe. People started noticing. A woman named Yanel, who ran the gas station off Route 16, watched him load pallets into the F-250 3 days running, and finally asked what he was doing out there. He told her, plain. She frowned and said, "Marcus, my cousin tried something like that in '09. They found him in April." She wasn't mocking. She meant it. A rancher named Dwayne Pelkey, who leased grazing on the next section, drove out one afternoon and stood with his hands in his coat pockets watching Marcus stack pallets. Dwayne was maybe 70, weather-beaten, missing the tip of one finger. He didn't laugh. He said, "Son, you know the wind out here in February doesn't care what you built." Then he drove off. The man in the Carhartt at 3 in the morning was the only one who actually laughed. If you want to find out what Marcus Doyle built on that quarter section east of Glendive, and what happened the night the power went out for 9 days across eastern Montana, then subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what Marcus built on that slope is a story that changes how you think about the word shelter. The build took 31 days. He framed the cabin first. 8 feet by 10 feet, 6 foot 6 inch ceiling. Set on a footprint, he had dug 18 inches into the slope, so the back wall was already partly underground. He used a salvage 2x6 for the frame and sheathed the outside with double plywood. Every seam sealed with roofing tar. He traded a man 2 cords of split wood fall. The roof he framed at a low pitch, just enough to shed snow, and sheathed with the same double plywood, then covered in 2 layers of 6mm poly held down with furring strips. The poly was the moisture barrier. Sod that gets into your wall cavity will rot a frame in 1 season. He had seen it happen to a hooch in Iraq. Then came the sod. He cut every block himself with a flat spade and a square-edged shovel, each one roughly 18 inches by 12 inches by 4 inches thick, 40 pounds, give or take. He stacked them like masonry, root side down on the first course, root side up on the second, alternating, the way Dwayne Pelkey told him his grandfather had built a sod barn in 1934. The roots interlock when you stack them that way. The wall becomes one piece. He stacked the sod 6 feet thick on the north wall, 6 feet on the east and west, and 4 feet over the roof, sloping up to the stovepipe in the center. The south wall, the door wall, he left bare plywood with a small double-paned window he had pulled from a renovation job in town for $20. 2 failures during the build almost broke him. On day 14, the southwest corner of the sod wall slumped overnight. He had stacked too fast, hadn't let the lower courses settle. 3 feet of wall sheared off and fell. He sat in the dirt for 20 minutes looking at it. Then he rest-tacked it, slower, tamping each course with the back of the spade. On day 22, he lit a test fire in the barrel stove and smoke filled the cabin in 90 seconds. The stovepipe joint at the ceiling wasn't sealed. He climbed up onto the sod roof in 14 degrees Fahrenheit weather and rebedded the flashing and roofing tile with his bare hands because gloves wouldn't fit in the gap. His fingers were white for 2 days after. He lost 11 pounds in the first 3 weeks. His hands cracked open at the knuckles and bled into his gloves. He slept in the F-250 every night until the cabin was sealed. Dwayne Pelkey came back on day 19. He had a thermos of coffee and a roll of fiberglass insulation he said had been sitting in his barn for 6 years. For the ceiling, he said, "Sod's good. Fiberglass under the sod is better. Trapped air." Dwayne had built 3 sod outbuildings in his life. His wife had died of a stroke in February of 2021, alone in their farmhouse, while he was stuck on the wrong side of a closed highway in a blizzard. He didn't say that part out loud that day. He said it later. He told Marcus the fiberglass was free. He told Marcus where to put the stovepipe thimble. Then he drove off and let Marcus do the work. On the night of November 11th, Marcus closed the door of the cabin for the first time and sat down on a folding camp stool inside. He hadn't lit the stove yet. He wanted to know what the sod alone would do. Outside, it was 22 degrees Fahrenheit with a 15 miles per hour wind. Inside, on a thermometer he had nailed to the wall, it was 44 degrees Fahrenheit. No heat source. No insulation beyond the sod and Dwayne's fiberglass. Just the ground, doing what the ground does. He sat there for a long time. The wind, which had been the constant fact of his life for 2.5 years in the truck, was gone. Not muffled. Gone. He could hear his own breathing. He could hear the small tick of the cooling stovepipe. Nothing else. He lit the stove around 9 p.m. By 10 p.m., the interior was 64 degrees Fahrenheit. He took off his coat for the first time since October. He didn't cry. He sat on the camp stool with his hands open on his knees and looked at the door. After a while, he said, out loud, to nobody, "Okay." Then he lay down on the cot and slept 9 hours, which was the longest he had slept since 2019. If you have ever felt invisible in a country that watches you fall and looks the other way, consider subscribing to stay connected with this community. Because the people in these stories are not asking to be saved. They are asking to be seen and to be allowed to use what they already know. Connection is its own kind of shelter. The storm arrived on November 28th. It started as freezing rain. Eastern Montana picked up roughly half an inch of ice in 14 hours. Power lines came down across 4 counties. The substation that fed the grid east of Glendive went dark at 4:40 a.m. on November 29th and stayed dark for 9 days. Behind the ice came the cold. The temperature fell to minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit by the second night and held between minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit and minus 27 degrees Fahrenheit for the next 6. Marcus had laid in 1.5 cords of split cottonwood and box elder behind the cabin under tarp. He had 14 gallons of water in jugs. He had rice, beans, oats, canned tomatoes, and a small bag of coffee Yanel had given him. Inside the cabin, on the morning of November 30th, the interior temperature was 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside it was minus 24 degrees Fahrenheit, differential of 85 degrees, with a stove burning maybe 3 small splits an hour. Out on the county road, things were different. A 71-year-old woman named Patricia Voss, who lived alone in a double-wide 2 miles west, lost a propane furnace on the second night when the regulator froze. Her son in Bozeman couldn't reach her. A neighbor found her on the morning of December 2nd, alive but hypothermic, wrapped in every blanket she owned in a 38 degrees Fahrenheit bedroom. She survived. 2 people in the broader region did not. A man named Lyle Henriksen, 59, was found in his pickup on a county road north of Wybos on December 3rd. He had run out of fuel. On the 3rd day of the storm, a knock came at Marcus's door. It was a man in the Carhartt. His name was Ray. He was Yanel's brother-in-law. He had been the one laughing at 3 a.m. He stood in the doorway with frost on his beard and a sleeping bag in his arms, and he could not get the words out. His furnace was dead. His wife and his 8-year-old daughter were in the truck. Marcus said, "Bring them in." He did not say anything else about that night. Not then. Not later. He moved his cot against the wall and pulled out the 2 foam pads he had been saving. The little girl, whose name was Annalise, fell asleep on the floor by the stove inside 20 minutes. Ray sat at the small folding table with his hands wrapped around a mug and stared at the sod wall like he was reading something written on it. 2 more people came on day 5. A young man named Cody from property a mile east and an older woman, Marlene, who had been actually walking, down the county road in minus 19 degrees Fahrenheit looking for a house with a chimney smoking. The cabin held 7 people for 2 nights. Interior temperature never dropped below 58 degrees Fahrenheit. The sod did the work. The stove just edited it. Dwayne Pelkey rode out on day 7 on a track side-by-side to check on him and found a full house. He didn't say much. He left a sack of potatoes and went home to feed his cattle. The power came on at 11 p.m. on December 7th. By then, the story of the buried cabin had moved through Glendive the way stories move in small towns, person to person, at the gas station, the feed store, and the VFW. Ray came back 2 weeks later with a case of motor oil and a cord of split ash he had cut himself. He stood at the door and said, "I owe you, Marcus." Marcus shook his head and said, "Bring it inside. It's cold." A woman from the county extension office drove out in January. Her name was Dr. Susan Morales. She studied rural cold-weather housing at Montana State. She measured the cabin, photographed the sod courses, asked Marcus to walk her through every decision. She wrote a 14-page report. She used the word vernacular a lot. She told Marcus that what he had built was, by her measurements, performing at roughly an effective R40 wall assembly for almost no money. Marcus told her where he had learned it. He told her about Enbar. He told her about Dwayne's grandfather and the 1934 sod barn. He told her the Army taught him to build things to keep people from dying, and he had finally gotten to use it the right way. She asked if she could share his methods with 2 reservation housing programs that were looking at low-cost cold-weather builds. He said yes. He said, "Tell them to stack root down on the first course. Tell them to let it settle a week before they go higher. Tell them the fiberglass under the sod isn't optional." He sat alone in the cabin that night after she left and listened to the wind not come in. Marcus Doyle is still on that quarter section as of this winter. The heirs in Seattle eventually noticed and, instead of running him off, signed a 5-year caretaker agreement for $1 a year because a property tax assessor liked that someone was watching the land. He has built a second, smaller sod structure as a workshop. Dwayne Pelkey comes by on Sundays. Ray's daughter Annalise sends him drawings. The methods Dr. Morales documented have been used, so far, in the construction of 4 other sod berm shelters across eastern Montana and western North Dakota. None of them are pretty. All of them are warm. What I want you to take from this story is small and specific. There's a man in this country, right now, who slept in a truck for 2 winters and then built himself a home out of dirt and pallets and the things he learned in a war nobody talks about anymore. He did it with a bad back and $1,800 and a borrowed roll of fiberglass. He sheltered the man who laughed at him without ever once making him apologize. The knowledge that saved his life was knowledge nobody had asked him about in 15 years. What do you know, in your hands, that nobody has asked you about? And what would you build with it, if the cold ever came for you the way it came from Marcus Doyle? If you stayed with this story to the end, that means something. Your time is the one thing nobody can give back to you, and you spent some of it here, with a man you'll never meet, on a slope of frozen prairie. There's another story on this channel waiting for you right now. Another person who built something out of nothing and survived a season the rest of us only read about. These stories exist because the people in them deserve to be remembered, and because the rest of us deserve to know what is possible. Consider staying. Until next time, take care of yourself, and take care of the people the cold finds first.